All right, this is the ABC Huddle for October 19th, 2022. Today we're going to talk about two meetings, Westland City Council for September 19th and Hillsborough Planning Commission for September 28th. We're going to start with the Westland City Council meeting, and I'm going to share screen. This one is going to be a little more high level, like we're talking like, well, I'm sure you'll see it's very involved. And I think Chris, as our proofer on this particular meeting, really hit the nail on the head. There's a lot going on in these meetings. And I think sometimes it's easy to be overwhelmed maybe or distracted by all the little things that are going on and then trying to pull that into something that's just on point for the reader. So let me share my screen. Let's see if I've got these up correctly. So this is, okay, that's the original. We're just going to focus. We can pull the original out in a minute, but we're just going to focus on the nitty gritty. So take this from the top. The two things I want to cover on this particular meeting is looking at presentations at a 10,000 foot level. So a lot of, and this comes across all of our boards, but when they have a presentation before council, it's usually at the beginning of the meeting. Maybe it's a report or an update from the Chamber of Commerce, or maybe it's an update from the food bank or the homeless shelter or the urban renewal committee, you know, all of these little updating council on something or other, and they bring people in for a presentation. And so those presentations can really be done at a 10,000 foot level. We can come back to some of these changes later, but I really wanted to just nail in on this presentation part right here. So it's difficult often, and I have the blessing of looking at it. All the notes are there. I can kind of get a sense of what's happening. Because it's difficult to find out like what are the salient points when you're 2 minutes in, you don't know if these people are talking for 5 minutes or 25 minutes. And so I thought I would just share maybe my approach. I'm curious how Letty does this also, because she also does a great job of summarizing some of these crazy presentations that come before us. In how I proof a file is very similar to how I also transcribe it myself. So we're here for this Child Care for All presentation. We have two presenters, and Bridget introduces Danny right at the top of the bill, right? She gets going, and she has a kind of a lead in of what's happening. And you can tell, there's a PowerPoint, next slide, right? So when it's a presentation and there's a couple of people presenting, what I encourage you to do is to, there's a couple of different ways that they do this, right? In this particular example, and Chris can attest to this, Bridget talks for a minute and then Danny takes over, and then Bridget comes back and then Danny takes over, and they just kind of parlay this presentation back and forth saying different things. Originally, the transcriptionist did a great job because often we will just bring Bridget all in one, then we'll put Danny all in one. The challenge with that is a lot of times they're interrelated. So as the reader's reading, it's very disjointed. Like Bridget's talking at his, and now we're down. Oh no, this makes sense down here. So the reader's like, what the heck is happening, right?
Right.
So when I have a presentation where the speakers are laying back and forth, I will change it up. And I will show you what it ultimately looked like in a second. The other thing that I'm doing, and many of you know, as I call them my chicken scratches, as I read what the transcriptionist has sent me, I'm looking for, as I'm listening, I'm thinking, whoa, thinking about key next steps. It's interconnected with, I think we had housing shortages or something in there. So I'm typing phrases that I'm like, oh, that should probably be in the minutes, or I need to work that wording in there. So I'll just make these little extra notes. So when you get a edits file back and you see these random italicized notes, sometimes I'm not always good about changing to italics, sorry. That's just me kind of thinking out loud and trying to get thoughts on paper. And then I use those notes to really formulate my nice, pretty little presentation summary, if you will. There was a lot of material. I mean, these gals went on for probably 20 minutes, I think, was the total, a 20-minute presentation.
Yeah.
And so, like, what do we do? And Christy did a great job of, extrapolating, like, just multiple organizations. We don't need to know every single one. Again, Westland and most all of our clients want these presentations just boiled down. People can watch the video, they can listen to the audio, they can pull out the PowerPoint. But it is important to have some things on the record.
Right.
So that's kind of where that's why you see all of these extra italicized in here. Okay, so I just wanted to hit on one other thing before I showed you the quote unquote final. One of the things that happened with the transcriptionist in this case is they put, because Bridget was the beginning, forgive my scrolling, I'm sure you guys catch up with me by now. Bridget was the initial presenter and kind of overseeing this entire deal. But she comes back and at the end, she's like, in order for council to support, they're asking for council support. And that's usually right at the end of a presentation. And that's where we want it, because they're building their story, they're showing what their needs are, the dire circumstances. And now this is what we're here before council. We need you to sign an initiative in this example. And so that really should be at the end. Okay. And that's why I ended up rearranging the whole thing. It's challenging as a transcriptionist because you're just going in blind. You really don't know. So yeah. Letty, do you want to offer something on how you approach some of these types of presentations? You always do such a stellar job in making that, you boil it down to the nitty gritty, but you face the same thing. You don't know how it's going on and all that stuff. So I'm interested in your feedback.
Yeah, my process is pretty similar. As I'm listening, I literally just do note taking. And like, I get out of my transcription mindset and I just type notes, and I'm just typing out key phrases or key points. And then I go back and turn all of that into a paragraph. And since I'm combining so much dialogue, you said this presentation, I think, was 20 minutes. So with the timestamps at the beginning of my paragraph, I will put the timestamps for the start and stop time of the entire presentation. That way, you or whoever's proofing knows, oh, okay, this one paragraph took them 20 minutes. But still, if I'm not sure of something and need to put something in blue, I still put the exact timestamp within that paragraph. Mm-hmm. But as far as just kind of condensing all that information, I try to think about, okay, if I were going to turn this presentation into maybe like a PowerPoint, what are the key slides I'm going to have? Mm-hmm. And I'll just do some bullet points and then go back after the fact and just turn everything, into one big paragraph, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you nailed it. I like that because I appreciate that you said, she does this great, and it's a great habit, to get into. It really lets me know. It's like, all right, these guys are droning on for 20 minutes. That, and then as proofers, not for the transcriptionist necessarily, as a proofer, then you can turn your Express Scribe out to where it's cranking out at like 160%. Don't get to it at 100%, like, that's just too long, right? And the other thing too is a lot of times you don't have PowerPoints. There's no PowerPoint available. Like Astoria never gives us PowerPoints. So she's always going blind. And that's why you heard her say, I'm trying to think about if this was a PowerPoint, where would I put that as a key topic? So that's a great tip. Any questions so far?
So just to clarify, so if we have a presentation with more than one presenter, mm-hmm. It's Susie, whatever Susie's saying, Frankie, whatever Frankie's saying, back down to Susie next. So we're not necessarily coalescing it, boiling it all down. So we do want to keep.
Nope, flip it. Let me go to the next step. That's great. Okay. So if we have, in this case, Bridget, Danny, Bridget, Danny, Bridget, Danny, right, we're going to have what I'm going to show you in a second. There are, like, for instance, when a city goes through, like, for instance, their transportation systems plan and they're doing an update, They might have staff will do like a little intro. And if anybody's done a Wilsonville meeting, this is what they do. Staff will do an intro, and then their civil engineer, their traffic engineer will come on. And then the traffic consultant for the city will come on. Those are all almost always separated. Just he said, she said, they did this PowerPoint, introduced this project. Then the city staff engineer continued the presentation, and then another little summary. And then the DKS consultant came on board and reviewed all the turning movements for the entire city, whatever. So there are cases where that happens, but in this case, one, it's just a presentation, it's an update to council.
Right.
And this is when they do back and forth, back and forth. So this is what happened. I ended up made all my notes. I actually took this to a completely different Word document just so I could play with it. And so this is what happened. Bridget and Danny presented via PowerPoint this childcare for all.
Okay.
And then I introduced it as an initiative for universal health childcare in Clackamas County. Now, they don't say that until like minute 15 of their presentation. Like, so the benefit, like Letty says, of if you have your notes down, then you're like, oh, this is what they're talking about. Let's move that around. And this is why I say this is kind of, I don't know, college course level 650. I mean, you know, it's more high level transcription. It's challenging for some people to do. People that summarize all the time, they click with this. And I think Letty certainly falls into that. So it's not necessarily something I would expect from a newer transcriptionist or even a newer proofer, but this is the direction we want to head. This is next level, if you will.
No, I agree. And this was challenging because I was, you know, both me and the transcriptionist are new at this deal. And yeah, there was a lot to unpack. And structurally, there's also some nuances with any given client. So I wasn't sure, okay, do we now have to do it? It's my turn to parley, it's your turn to dance. What are we doing here? So no, thank you. This is very good.
Good. And I believe I sent the edits. I'm curious, just as an overall question, as we do a screen share, so maybe it's not necessary, but I'm wondering if attaching the documents we discuss would be helpful on the Trello card for like a replay later. Is that just too much information?
I was just going to ask you how long this was, how many pages this particular document was, and see if you could forward it. It would be for me to sit and look at this, because I think I mentioned to you somewhere along the line that when I get a completed document, something I've worked on, but it comes back to me as a clean one and it's a final document, I've been trying to keep that in a file so that I see when I get the next one, okay, these are the little nuances that the way they like their little format, these little tidbits but this would be, this is a good example in our conversation now, if I could see this, because see, Chris has seen it, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And of course, Letty knows everything anyway, we know that, but I have not seen this at all. So it would be helpful for me if I could look at this and kind of absorb, especially if you're going to have the recorder, if this comes through in the next day or so when you can get to it. And I can take a little bit of time for me. I'm talking about just for Aline here now, but that would be helpful for me. It really would be, just so I could get a little bit better. You know, it's great to see it this way and we're talking about it, but it's a different thing when you have some time to sit and really concentrate and say, because I'm making notes here, but yeah, that would be helpful for me if I could go back.
Okay,
if
great.
It's not 27 pages. Now, if it's 27 pages, honey, just send me the first few.
It's 21.
Currently it's 21 and we still have 2 hours left of the meeting.
Yeah.
Oh,
This was the easy part of this damn thing. And from there, there were no high points. This was the high point of the whole meeting. And then it went downhill rapidly because the questions just kept going.
Oh, no.
So because I'm the reason for the meeting tonight, because I have this whole raft of questions based on this. So Paul, whenever you're done, I'll go to the next round of questions for this. And some of it is stuff I know you haven't gotten to in your own editing. So, you know, however you want to do this.
Okay, so one of your questions, I believe, well, let's finish this work session part up.
Yeah.
Finish
Yeah,
child
go ahead.
things. So the other thing, and this again goes across all our presentations, is in this case, they finished their presentation, and then one counselor, Councilor Relier, asked one question. And then thereafter, there were all of these, then they just started commenting. And then there were questions later. So what we do is we put all of the questions first so that they're clarified, and then we add the comments later. And you'll see that I've done that in this final. I won't even bore you with the details on this, but in this case, a little wordy as far as integrating the question into the response. And Chris, you mentioned that, a lot of times there's a little more direct way of doing it. So sometimes if you just say clarified that the data they used was X, Y, and Z, rather than in this case, the transcriptionist included pretty much the whole question and then tried to tap on the answer, which is challenging to do as a transcriptionist for one. And then it's also challenging for the reader to digest what exactly is the question here. So we can just write to quick. And that's where I just said clarify that the data used came from, and then it just picks up right here. That's basically the same information. And so because Relier immediately responded that he would like to have this as a discussion with staff and the public, I retained his response there just as an indent. But this, responses to counselor question were as follows. This doesn't happen across all of our boards, but 90% of them, and this is where ABC is starting to move as how did Chris, I think Chris and I were talking about, we are the head, not the tail. We are getting so many clients right now that I really feel we can step up our game. And this is and now I'm doing that. We just secured another City of Forest Grove contract because the recorder's out. And then I think I mentioned we have these 39 backlog meetings for the city of McMinnville. Both of those are entirely new contracts than what we had when we started in June. So rather than trying to parlay I just say, this is what our work sessions look like. This is what our public hearings do. And, we might do the bolding and some of the indenting similar, but everything now is coming into an ABC form of formatting. It's easier for you guys. It's easier for us.
Yeah.
And
Good.
The clients aren't complaining. They're like, yes, okay, we'll do it. We'll do it. So
Good.
run in with
No,
that.
that's good. No, that's good. That's good.
So this responses to counselor questions eliminates the he said, she said back and forth, trying to figure out what speaker's on, and then it just dials it in. So starting with that, then I just moved all of the questions, so they follow under this. And I know this looks like a hot mess for those of you who hadn't seen this meeting happening, but I think, it's across the board. We'll just do the bullets and the responses, and most of you are familiar with that. So.
Right. The kind of add on to that piece is in the presentation. And like I said, I don't know if you've even gotten into the material about ODOT. That's the rest of this deal is Prior, I guess it is doing his presentation. And then there's a raft of questions. Then there's some more presentation. Then there's a raft of questions. And this goes on for hours.
Okay.
And so structurally, you're either dealing with, 3,000 words of presentation, and I'm guessing here.
Yeah.
And then 5,000 words of response that may or may not be relevant to the presentation that's just done. So I really had some questions about how do we do this? Because this is obviously a very pressing issue for them. The tolling, everybody's very fired up about it. And I understand we've already covered passion, but structurally this meeting was really all across the board. And so I understand in the previous example about the childcare, where it covers, 20 minutes, we can boil that down. We can get, a couple of paragraphs of relevant information, add in council comments, council questions, respond to that, wrap it all up, and we're done. In this thing, the rest of the meeting, presumably, or much of the rest of the meeting, there are so many pieces where Prior is adding on more things, and then council's asking questions, then adding on more things. And frankly, I don't know what we want to do as a standard, or what we need to do as a standard, or even how you want to structure that. So when I came to proof that, yes, there was plenty of stuff still to be proofed, but structurally I had questions with just how do we square this circle? Because there's a lot of square here, or there's a lot to square.
Yep. Well, and I see, you know, cut to it shows me that similarly, you know, when it's the transcription is staying within their field and that they're doing the same thing. They're just pulling up comments. But you're right. In this case, when it's generally when it's budget or transportation, to me, that's the standard. That's when we do pull out more of like, he introduced, what is it? The transportation presentation via PowerPoint, whatever, and we do our little summation and address questions as follows. Then we just do the questions. Then if he says, okay, any more questions? Nope. Okay, he'll continue continued the presentation.
Okay.
Sometimes we have to break it down, just more of a he said, she said, because especially with transportation and then also with budget, you know, when they are talking money pools, public funds here and there, you just really can't, and you shouldn't mix them all together.
Oh, and logically that, I mean, that makes sense, but I just have not ever seen it to this degree. So, you know, when we start to get in and I'm looking at the timestamp going, my God, this thing is never going to end.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at that, because I first pulled up the audio file, I'm like 4 hours, they must have left it recording.
Yeah.
And they didn't. I'm
Not
like,
Westland. No.
oh, okay. But you know, the transcription is, he did a great job of capturing, you know, by and large what's going on. Yeah, there's some style points in there we won't get into, but you know, to your point, we're going to go a little bit, we're going to ask some questions, we're going to go a little bit, we're going to ask some questions. That makes perfect sense if you're going 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 pages, but you know, here we're going 12, 13, 14 pages, and I'm like, this is. So it started to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. Is this really the way to do it? And I realized we could strike a lot because some of it's superfluous because he's restating the question, answer the question. So I get that. And I'm just looking at your word count versus my word count going, okay, she's already cut 1,000 out of it off the top of my head. So that makes sense. In transportation budget, that answers one of my questions right there, because it seemed a bit extreme, but I understood why it needed to follow that course of action. It just seemed like, oof, there's a lot of this going on. So, okay.
There's a lot. And I think sometimes too, you know, because of the length of the meetings, it's been more of a challenge. You know, I like to have shorter meetings to help train on, you know, and it gets a little arduous when you think, oh my gosh, I've still got 2.5 hours of this meeting left. Like, you know.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So I just wanted to be able to plug in to this first, even though you're right, I'm still not done proofing it. It will get done, but I just felt like I really needed to just jump on this quicker, both for you and the transcriptionist. So we have.
And I appreciate that, because I know he's learning, I'm learning, and I knew this was going to be a very big meeting, that if we don't stay ahead of it, it's going to be, you know, weeks to get it completed and for you to be able to turn it over and get it off the plate. So no, I have no problem with that.
Okay, great. Okay, so anything else as far as the presentation Q&A kind of topic?
Public comments is what I have in my notes. Now I need to remember why I have that in my notes. Yeah, okay, so not necessarily on this one, but this is a part of it where we've got number one, Alice, who's her own person, but so some of these other folks,
Alice.
yeah, so some of these other folks, what's the balancing act for? I mean, are we just going to go for verbatim even if they wander hither and yon?
So that's a great question. As I was kind of proofing this, first of all, I think this was a question that came up. So in public comment, when we're having the council respond, whether it's Samara or the councilors, it's just against the left margin. Let me take a quick sip here. And then generally the rule comes back to money, public outreach, public interaction, public comment, and money. No, and maybe safety. If there's certain issues that you all can probably have a sixth sense about right now, it's like, oh yeah, that's the city needs to know about, or the community needs to be heard on this particular issue.
Right.
And so in this case with Tanner, one, he's a city council candidate, so he's probably here using this as a wonderfully free way for him to do some promotion. Not our
Right.
jam, we're just responsible for the audio. So, okay. The key thing here is this is where the money comes in. So because this, they're talking about tolling, and his comment was, because part of Oregon City is closer, they're going to have to use this bridge. So because of the proximity of services, and I think that's what might have been some of his language, some people were making 12 to 15 trips every week, which would mean they would be paying $120 to $240 per month in tolling fees alone. That's not groceries or gas or anything else. So including the money part, the financial impact, is always good.
Okay.
And then at the end, he asked, where does ODOT want our comments to be made, so we don't have to keep coming before you, council? And then Jones, I believe Jones responds to that. And how they can get back, oh yeah, reach out to ODOT. Mayor responds to that later. So
And then that was that prompts the next question. And this is pre your edits. So, and we'll put in council reply to public comments in this case. We put that in, obviously.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
When I wrote my notes, I had not seen your edits on here, and it just seemed a bit odd that council was replying to these public comments, and I wasn't sure if there was a set way to do that, or because it seems as though in certain instances, and I don't remember who it is, maybe it's I don't know, somebody, Hillsborough, I'm trying to remember, where public comments is well, I'm sorry. Let me take a
You
step.
mean like there's a more formal sentence leading into, okay.
Correct.
Yeah, we don't need
this-
those. Nope.
Okay.
Nope. We just identify the speaker. So, in this case, Mayor Walters on behalf of council. So she's responding to this discrimination thing. Makes
Correct.
sense. So we don't need a lead in. Nope.
Okay. All right. That's yeah, that's what I had.
Okay. Great.
So,
Sometimes just as a reminder, like these entities, a lot of times we do assign a pronoun like their, THEIR, as ownership or owner, like a possessive, but we really need to be using the word its, because it is an entity. It's not a person or personality, if that makes sense. And then sometimes we'll finesse it a little bit, and it seemed to me it might have been just the way the wording was, like where I replaced to discuss with that conversation. But let's see, let me read this. Council raised a concern on how tolling would impact residents that use the corridor on a regular basis with ODOT, and would continue that conversation. And I think it was just, and would continue to discuss so people would not be overwhelmed. He probably said, and would continue to discuss so people would not be overwhelmed. But that's where I call it like a polished transcription, because to continue to discuss what, to continue to discuss the matter. I mean, it seems obvious, but I just kind of polish it and they're going to continue that conversation, and they're going to continue reaching out to ODOT or something, just a little bit more, if you will. And then the word questioned usually means it kind of implies more of a challenging, like they're challenging something. So I'm very light on ever using the word questioned. Always defer to asked or inquired. It's a little more of a friendly, doesn't seem like it's as conflictive, or that would put somebody on defensive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There are times when you can tell they are questioning data. They are questioning someone's motive, right? But for the most part, we are asked and inquired. Okay. I think those were the things, just the order. Yeah, I know that it was kind of like a buckle up session on the WLCC.
And how?
It's meaty. It's meaty. So great work. Keep up the good work. I know it's just a lot to sift through. These are probably one of our more challenging meetings. The good news is, with the latest council, we're actually summarizing. A year ago, we were writing a lot more out. Like, it was 40 pages of minutes going in. So
Good
there's
Lord.
the upside. This is actually great.
God.
Oof.
God.
Choke. Yeah. Okay. How about on to greener pastures with Hillsborough? Let's see. Now I need to pull that one up. I apologize. I did not have that on my brain, but fortunately everything's just a click away. All right. And I'm wondering, let's see, we'll just go with this one. All right, got it. Do you want to kick us off, Chris, as far as, is there something specific on the HPC, or do I just go through a little list here?
I need to go back down the rabbit hole with this one.
Okay.
Let's see. First thing, well, yeah, as my notes talk about the Village Green Garden Apartments, the inconsistency with that, because it was proper noun or wild ass guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were some questions with that, and sort of what the default becomes, because in some cases we don't know the way they're maybe used, especially by a presenter, is they're using it like it's a formal place, but it may not be a proper noun. They're using it like it's something super special. And so contextually, it's tough to pull that out.
It is. And I got that sense also. And so I defaulted to, and in this case, yeah, I defaulted to the Village Green, because a lot of time it was the Village Green, like that was a special green space. And then Garden Apartments is like, it was more, it did go back and forth on whether that was formal or it was just the apartments by the garden.
Yep.
So I would put those in blue. But my note here is, like, if you're going to capitalize Village Green, capitalize it through the whole document. If you're going to not capitalize Garden Apartments, don't capitalize it throughout the whole thing, because that makes if I stumble onto it, or staff lets me know, or something comes across my desk that corrects that, I can do a find replace much quicker.
Okay.
And so it's just more of, choose a horse, stay on it.
Yeah.
And just real quick too, a lot of times, we always hear this, they ask that the commissioners wish to declare. We need to make sure that we state there were no declarations. If it's silent, we still need to make sure that the record notes that no one declared anything either.
Okay.
Just so it's not vague.
All right. I think there was a lot of juicy stuff in this one now that I'm looking at it, but it was fairly straightforward. I thought Claire did a very good job on it, but there was a lot of information, and also there was, the presenters were actually pretty coherent. I think there was only one, weirdo in the whole group that started making up terms and phrases and kind of dancing around in the firelight. Everybody else was pretty straightforward. So it should have been, there was a lot of clean transcription, a lot of clean structure that just sort of put it in where it needed to go. there were, yeah, right here where, right there, 3133.9 marble. There's some, you had to do some kind of pull some stuff out of there. That one particular phraseology where he's going in there with lineal feet, it got really wordy and really weird in the audio.
Mhm.
So you had to kind of guess this is what he really means.
Yeah.
But I don't remember there being a lot of junk in this one. It was pretty straightforward, and quite frankly, it was a lot easier to understand.
Good. It's really good.
Oh, and yeah, Grillo went off the reservation a few times, but that's kind of what he does.
That's what he does. We recognize our patterns. We recognize our personalities, right? It makes a big
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So there were some, formatting things as far as Grillo, and then everything was fine here, but then all of a sudden we started defaulting back to it. I probably should just pull up the original here. Oh, whoopsie. All right. Okay, so now I've got the original on the left and the proof on the right. Let's just bring it down to, where was that? And McAnally talks like an engineer, so it's, or a urban designer. He definitely has he wears his profession on his sleeve. Okay, so here we are. The changes were great. So I'm looking, when I do this, just as a reminder for those of you who aren't familiar with the proofing side, is the blue highlights are what our proofers do. The gray is what I go in and change, add, subtract, etc. So I think a lot of this in here was more cleanup, and I think a lot of it had to do with because of the audio issues that we had. I think a lot of that stems from clients still going with a hybrid. If they're either all in chambers or if they're all on Zoom, it's different. But when there's a mix, that's when we seem to have a lot of audio issues.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's
Because they're
true.
not in front of the microphone.
Yeah, or they don't, they don't remember that's what they need to be. So these blues is just starting that, Hillsborough, all of our planning commissioners or all of our planning commissions do this. I don't believe it, except for Astoria, have that we start with the verb. So Griot, asked, noted, stated, asked, that's how we're starting it off. And the bullets in the original started waning to just starting off with a question instead of that lead in. So we want to do that for consistency. And then on this 36, so I also added in here, the block was it. So so the block was 800 feet long. When I see that, it's like, well, is that a question? Did they just get to put it with the prior paragraph? So clarified is that we understand that there was probably a question asked and answered. So then when we get into that was the same. I don't know why that's gray. So I would say one thing I noticed, like relate to both sides of the street. That was great. I thought that too, but it was just enough unclear that I went ahead and added a timestamp and put it in blue for staff. It's okay if we can't hear, and we're only responsible for what we can actually hear. And we're actually, I think we do better sometimes than staff in hearing. So if we can just indicate that, we're having troubles with this audio, that's easily done with blue and a timestamp. And then when I send it to client, I'll say, we had some audio issues, and, it's not like, we're making excuses, but it also helps them to understand, like, and I have said, like, check your audio recorder or make sure people talk into their mics. They can then use us and say, hey, and I've had meetings do this. It's like, okay, our transcriptionist is having trouble hearing you guys. If you could, they use us as the scapegoat, if you will, which is totally fine for us. So, so don't hesitate to put those in if you need them. And then,
Okay.
I'm just looking at this gray in here. There was some insertion, material that I inserted just to clarify, or things were missing, like the whole 800 block length was a long way. I think that was just missing material. Additional streets were not allowed by the county because it seemed like it was just a little too summarized. And so
Okay.
just watered down his point. So when we're in the Q&A part of any presentation, when we're in the Q&A part of any hearing, and I believe that's where we're at. Yes, I think so. Oh, come on, Paula Lee. There we go. Public hearing, Q&A is at a verbatim level of detail. Hillsborough, all of our clients are really pretty well spoken, and I know Grio can kind of go off on a tangent, but usually his circling the bush and coming around has a purpose.
No, I agree.
So we kind of get the granulars out and write it out. But like in this instance, when they're stating distances and, anything, all of this is very relevant, right? So all of it should be in the record, and we just polish it a bit.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So I had this in yellow because I was going to use this as a training point. I'm just looking at this 39 for just a quick minute. Great job. Purple means well done. Okay, so jumping down to both staff and the applicant. Okay, I think this might have been one of those audio things with Marble. Eliminated the word both because she only states one thing. And then, okay. So including both staff and the applicant had asked for some type of rapid rectangular flashing beacon. And that was a hard no from the county. So it's important that both staff and the applicant was included in that. It was very vague. And there was no subject. Who asked? That sentence did not really make sense about there's no one to attribute the ask to, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So it does two things. It wasn't just the staff and the applicant came together. They're both separate, and they kind of went on about this for a minute. It's like basically
Yes.
The county is saying, which is crazy because it's a huge safety issue. So that's why those little delicate beads of information are important to include.
Okay.
Same with orange typically means training, so that's why I'm bopping down. Nope, it was included. I think it was just capital street. It wasn't a formal, I just didn't capitalize it. Did you have anything else in particular? I know this was kind of a off the cuff here.
In this particular instance, it was a kind of a non-issue question because I left it in. It was Grillo and his Katie bar the door, and then he had some other colloquialism that just was like, come on.
Yeah.
And but that prompts a question from the piece today, which I left in on one I just uploaded, but where whoever it is points out that the only people on that bus are a bunch of losers. Really? That's probably not the best thing to put in that record, but okay, sure, you said it. But
Yes.
Yeah, when we see people, again, Katie bar the door got left in on your copy, so obviously it's okay. It's just one of those things where you go, oh my Lord, please act like you have some, you didn't just roll in out of the pumpkin patch. So
Where's that line?
It was back up a bit when Grillo started going off about the 800-foot block length.
But your question is where's the line? Where do we put it in? Where do we leave it out?
Yeah, do we leave it in or we do leave it out? Obviously, we leave it in because you left it in, and that was your copy. So that kind of answers my question. And I had a question on the one I uploaded today because it was talking about theoretically the constituents.
Our
So
losers.
I bumped it in red, so you
Good.
can see that and you'll go, well, maybe we should soften this up a little bit. So yeah, Katie bar the door I left in, so that was just
Yeah.
whatever.
So the reason looking at Katie bar the door is an actual colloquialism that you can look up online, and it says exactly what he meant, right?
Right.
And so I turn it in. It also gives the counselors a little more of their personality sound kind of comes through. So as you're transcribing, there are certain people have more of a business discussion, and all of you can, I'm in those that are listening to the recording, I'm sure you can pick out those counselors that this is their writing, this is their talking style, and this is kind of how I write. So that kind of is reflected in it. Same thing with Griot. He uses those, but it also just gives a peek into a little more of his personality. He's trying to connect and relate with people. On the flip side, with the loser thing, perfect approach. And that would be, this probably shouldn't be in here, but that's not our job. And so rather, Chris, and I don't know if our other proofers are doing this too, but when in doubt, everything should be in blue. Orange is typically a training thing that I will put in, but then I don't have to go in and change it back to blue, like the loser thing, right?
Okay.
Blue would go also, that's our kind of our standard for our clients. When they see blue with a timestamp or they see anything in blue font, they know, oh, ABC has a question about this, or
Okay.
yeah,
I can fix that. I put it in red because it was just jumping off the page, and I was like, this is the important, this is not a little minor thing, this is the bigger thing, because somebody's acting stupid and they're gonna get in trouble.
Well, and I know from the team, when I see something in blue, that is an indication to me that my team has, that's for Paula's attention. Like, whoa, so if it's in blue, it's already big.
Okay.
And then with a timestamp, then I know I can go and say, oh yeah, that's exactly what he said. And I don't know if we'll just leave that to staff, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, great question.
No, it wasn't a great question, but I appreciate you consistently giving me a great question. Attaboys every time I ask a question. They're usually not that good, but I appreciate you making me feel good, like, I got a gold star.
Well, if it's something that you have a question about, it's a good question. There are no bad questions. So that's how you learn. And I'm one of those, like, if I have a question about something, like my husband and I watching the movie, right? If I don't catch something in the beginning, it's like eating at me. I can't concentrate on the rest of the movie because I think about the first thing that happened in the first 5 minutes. Like, can we please rewind? I'm just not clear.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So, and I guess, as you guys look at the edits, and I'll say for Claire as well, if you're looking at the edits, Claire, and because I know she's going to come back on, she got things going on today, just to make a note, and then we can get on a one-on-one and we can pull Chris in if we need to, but I want to make sure that you get any of your questions addressed about the edits from the HPC as well. Yay, that's all I had for today. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
No, like I said, I shared all mine, and again, I know
Something's happening.
there's nobody there, Chirella. You're seeing things, I think.
Hearing things.
Do I need to get the shotgun out, boys? Do I need to get the shotgun?
No, I'm good if you will send that one that we were just talking about.
With the
Since
markups
these
on
are
it?
things that Chris worked on, and
Sure.
then I have you and I are going to catch up.
Everybody
next
can
week.
relax.
Find out
Chirella bumped his head.
Tuesday.
Yep, I saw it. Thank you. I
From 12
appreciate
to
that.
1. Did you get that? Okay.
Yep,
And we'll
that's
go over
perfect.
that.
Yeah,
We
sounds
just
great.
didn't meet last week.
I
We
know.
were going to kind of talking about it, and then that's all right. No big deal. It went through. I just wondered why.
Yeah,
But
no,
I do need
appreciate that.
clarification on that.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
that'd be good.
And we'll do that Tuesday. That works for me. I'm
Okay.
good.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank
This was
you.
good. I enjoyed it, as always.
Mhm.
And then we're not gonna meet on the 2nd, but we do have one more. We have next week for the end of
Yeah.
October. God, October's almost over with. Do you realize that?
I know.
No, it's almost hunting season.
We're already
October's,
hunting in Oregon, so.
Well, if I still did archery or I did muzzleloader, sure, but it's not. It's gun season opens Saturday. So, and the weather's actually cool.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great day. Mosquitoes died by the millions last night here, which
Oh,
doesn't
thank
usually happen
goodness.
this time of year.
Right, right.